Sorry this made it to you, but I was told you needed a reminder. Regret. It's a dirty little word which implies a very shitty feeling that describes the life you are currently living. And if that doesn't hit, let it sit for a bit because nothing else I spit should make you regret watching this any more than that. And in the event I only have your attention for a few more seconds, let me be clear. You will regret living as you by the time your time is up. I'll say it again. You will regret living as you. And at that point, there'll be nothing left for you to do. But not because you should. I mean, really, no one should. But because you don't do what's true to you. And my hope is that if you make it through this, one or two things happens. One, if you don't do anything to live true to you, pursuant, effective, immediately, then may the dirty feeling of regret cling to you like shit to a shovel. But if you choose to live true, then you'll regret this for a different reason. Because you will make a self-promise to acknowledge the pain and the regret of learning this late, to live as true to you as possible. There is no going back, and everything you do, or for that matter, everything you don't do from this moment forward will haunt you like a plague. Now, with that as a dramatic backdrop, let us break down how we regret not living as the true you and ultimately how we avoid it. Now, we don't talk about at parties. Now, I often wonder when I talk to myself, which is quite often that I talk to myself, if it's better to have always been sleeping or have fully awakened, because once awake, you can't unsee what is seen. So how do you know if you're sleeping? You don't. Regret is now your scapegoat, like a safe coat or something you cloak yourself with for convenience, because what you are currently experiencing is that you suck at life and are now numb and comatose to your truth. You, of course, you've tried this before. Living as truth in multiple relational moods, physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, professional. You choose. The only proof is that you ultimately failed, which means you lose. And while you might hate this fact, which is what creates the angst, disgust, and wishing it never happened, regret feeling, you can't change that it's real. It happened. Now, the logical truth associated with the emotions of this regret, the regret of doing something that we have tried and failed at, is that we assuredly don't want to experience that level of regret again. We want no part of it. Henceforth, there is a very real product of this regret that you are ignoring. It's not truly regret you're experiencing or preventing you from living as the true you. Rather, you defined your regret as a failure and an absolute finite endgame. It's not that you perceive to be losing. You believe you have already lost and it's game over. Therefore, you have subconsciously convinced yourself and submitted emotionally to self-doubt, insecurity, societal labels, programmings, false teachings, subliminal manipulations, and etc. You have allowed the losses of trying to live as the true you to stifle, stagnate, stasis, and cripple you like an anesthetic. So what are we left to do? I believe life is an emotional war. You can think of it like a river and a wall. The question for you is, are you the river or the wall? And the significance of the river and the wall comes down to the life experience of you being expressed as either dominance or submissiveness, which means you are either not living as the true you and therefore are emotionally submissive to the dominance of life, asleep, or you are attempting to live as the true you and therefore are emotionally dominant to the submissiveness of life, awake. Now let's quickly visualize the concept of the river and the wall. specific to dominance and submissiveness and how it applies. Think real quick of a wall, any wall, made of any substance, height, and might. The reality is there isn't a wall constructible, figuratively or literally, that water won't eventually dominate. Water will either grow in force proportionate to the wall and just go over or around it, even underneath it, or will find a slither, a crack, a compromise, and eventually seep and just, boom, break straight through it. Consider then that if you have fallen asleep, that you are nothing more than a wall in the way of life, and life has no choice but to continue and persist towards the evolution of itself, and therefore you have chosen a dominant response of submissiveness towards the power of life, and life has no choice but to drown you. Said another way, you have become dominantly weak because it's easier to sleep through it and just regret it later. So what do? You invert the process and dominate life into submission, because life has proven time and time again that it will give in to you in direct proportion to how you give into life, in that any genuine act towards a concentrated target over an extended period of time has no choice but to submit to the repeated action performed. Now, like the water, you might start out shallow. Like a stock, you might be worth pennies when you initially hit the market and go public. But there's only one way to force life to submit to your truth, and that's to build compound interest against the force of life, which means leaning into spending more time doing something than doing nothing. You are emotionally dominant to the submissiveness in life, and that if you just work, you cannot lose. And if you've ever needed more proof, just look around and ask anyone who has achieved their truth, and they all give you the same clue. It is constant investment into your physical, mental, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual strength. It means you are routined, disciplined, focused, and intentional. It again means you are a dominant form that submits to the requirements of a true life in order to allow life to submit in return to you. Just look, standing still and getting caught up means you aren't moving. And the illusion of this lifestyle is that it causes you to look down and see yourself in the same river, not realizing that although it's the same river, it's different water, and it's always about your next move. Let me give you a poem that I believe sums this up quite beautifully. It's called Invictus, great name, by William Henley, and it goes like this. Out of the night that covers, blackest pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced or cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Now listen to what this comes down to for me. When you don't do something that you are fearful you might wind up regretting, like trying to live as the true you, you'll always wonder in mystery, and that'll always hurt more than knowing for sure. It's not just that you'll see it as wasted, but it'll also be hollow. You won't be able to reflect on anything aside from emptiness, and you will look back. The emptiness of what could have been, but you'll never truly know. It's like, oh, I remember what I did. I did nothing. I did nothing about my health. I did nothing about my physical prowess. I did nothing about my skill set. I did nothing about my relationships with my spouse, my children, my profession, my family, my friends, with God, with my life. I mean, I spent the time, but all that's left to remember is what could have been. This one big wall you thought would block you from the fall, but a river runs through it anyway. I hope you regret this as much as I did. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.